guzzlers and animal lovers. Welcome to Caribou vs. Corporations, the podcast where nature collides with large companies. I'm your host, Hannah, and today we've got a packed panel with very different opinions about who gets to use, protect, and maybe exploit the land in British Columbia and Alberta. Let's meet our guests.
Hi, I'm John McKenzie, and I'm the executive of Cenovus Energy. We specialize in natural resource extraction in Western Canada.
And I'm Branches from West Fraser Timber. Our company has been promoting sustainable forest practices in Canada for over 7 years.
As you can see, we're very rich.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie John, an advocate for Indigenous environmental justice. I work alongside First Nations in Treaty 8 territories to protect First Nations culture and history.
And I'm Tree McGee, a wildlife conservationist with Conservation Northwest. I focus on species at risk, especially the mountain caribou, whose populations are declining fast.
All right, let's get right into it. Why do you think that you're in the right here? What are you fighting for?
The oil and gas sector contributes over $52 billion for Canada's GDP and offering 490 million jobs for Canadians. We power homes, hospitals, and cars.
We follow strict environmental standards and we replant trees to replace the trees that we harvest. Timber is essential for housing, construction, and even medical products. Without logging, entire rural economies would collapse.
We're also not blind to our negative impacts on the environment. We invested millions into land restoration and supporting policies to balance industry and conservation.
You talk about jobs and profit. Let's not forget about the cost, okay? So mountain caribous are spiritually and culturally vital to many Indigenous people in Alberta and BC. The destruction of their homeland is the destruction of Canada's history and identity.
And it's not just that. There are fewer than 1,200 southern caribou left in BC. You talk so much about restoring the land, but it's your industries that are destroying their habitats with roads, pipelines, and clear cuts in the first place. Even with your ineffective and bad restorations, what you're doing directly leads to increased predation, animal stress, and basically just the extinction of caribou, and you're pretty heartless about it.
All right, let's pause there. First Nations groups and Conservation Northwest talked about the industry's devastating impacts on animals and tradition. But Cenovus Energy and West Fraser Timber say that they're restoring the land and investing in caribou recovery. How true is that? How bad are the impacts of these industries on the land?
We've helped fund the $27 million BC Caribou Recovery Program, and we follow the environmental mitigation policy to avoid key caribou ranges.
Not only are we providing necessary resources to individual Canadians and boosting Canada's economy, we're activists for a better, more sustainable Canada.
Activism. Any reputable study will show that those efforts aren't enough. Caribou need at least 65% of their range undisturbed to survive, but yet your developments keep creeping in. You talk all big about donating $27 million to caribou recovery, yet you receive $26 million from the government for your land exploitation. I mean, in the end, everything cancels out and you're just left with all the negative impacts.
And even though you guys are doing all these operations on Indigenous land, you do not even ask for their decision, and they're not even included in your decisions altogether.
Wow, okay, sounds like we're starting to reach some heat here. So, what's the path forward? Is there any common ground?
Well, they're just jealous of the amount of money we have. We're working on integrating new tech and better planning. We can minimize impact with satellite mapping, restore habitats of post-extraction, and follow habitat offset programs.
Those are just band-aids to cover up all the little boo-boos you're causing. What we need are stricter laws, regulations, and real habitat protections, not just empty promises to save face.
Exactly. Fund Indigenous-led conservation and give land back where possible. Caribou recovery isn't just about the animals, it's about reconciliation.
Well, where do people go when there are no jobs left, or when the economy crashes without these industries and people can't pay their bills? It seems to me like you guys care more about caribou than people.
Well, where do the animals go when their forest is destroyed?
And where do Indigenous people practice the culture when their ancestral lands and their animals are gone and destroyed?
I don't care, we have money.
Yeah, but you have no heart.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. We're clearly not reaching consensus here, but maybe that's the point. This debate is messy and there's no simple fix. But if the caribou are going to survive, something has to give. Thank you to our lovely guest and our listeners for joining us on another episode of Caribou vs. Corporations. See you next time.